So, I've been in the news a little bit lately. And one of the things that we've been doing, I've been at Oricon for almost 4 years. We've been transforming the way that we work. And so if any of you have been to a client event that we've put on, you might see something like this in our foyer, which is a projector, projects over sand, and we do stuff with it, like it's a topography on there. But actually what we're thinking about is whether we can print things in sand and then make changes and project flows, or in this case it's water over the top of it. It's a way of interacting with designers and our clients in an interesting haptic way around what we do. So, and we do a lot of things all the way from power networks, roads, rail, Westgate Tunnel, as I'll talk a little bit about, and of course buildings. And in order to get people from a point where they have been over the last, we're talking about a firm which has a history of 80 years, and some of you are probably at firms with similar sorts of histories. It's not just like, next week we're going to start doing things with sand and projectors and so forth. So we've been underway with this program. It's been almost 4 years, and of course you've heard about John Hainsworth. John Hainsworth's been doing this his whole career. It's a program of change, very much around change and transformation. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means for an organisation like ours to go through that. And of course we're not through it. We're on one of those paths that you'll see, and you'll probably make some decisions yourselves about where you are as well. What we do is we also go out and we talk with our clients, and I'll share some insights that we've learnt from our clients about what they're doing at the moment. And I'll talk a bit broader around where the industry's going from our point of view as well, and give you some examples. So a couple of weeks ago, Adrian Turner, who's the CEO of Data 61, was on the radio. He was on the ABC Science Show. And he made some interesting announcements. He said, as we're probably all familiar with, we spend about 1.9% of our GDP on research and development in Australia. And that's about half of what the leaders spend in countries that you'd expect to hear: Germany, Korea, Japan. In fact, Korea is much further, around 5% of their GDP. And he said that we spend about 30% of our OECD counterparts on digital innovation. And he said, imagine if we lifted that up to where other countries, what they were spending on digital innovation, creating new products and services, developing our skills. Imagine what that would do. And he predicted that if we were to really invest in that, in 10 years' time, his figure is there'd be about $315 billion added to our economy. And so one of the things that we're thinking about, and I hope that you're all thinking about, is what do we do in the future? What sort of skills do we need to have to do our jobs? If we are going to deal with data sets more, what will we be doing with them? With those data sets, if they leave a factory somewhere in China and they come through these logistics supply chains that Warwick's talking about, then when we're optimising those in the future, because at the moment we largely put them into a facility and then we forget about them, leave them to a facility manager, what does that mean for the future if we're actually looking after them for a much longer period of time? So let's just wind back, and I like winding back to things that happened before I was born. So in 1968, there was a conference in architecture at Yale, one of the first conferences on computation in architecture at Yale University. Oh, am I back on? I'm back on. And there was a presentation at that conference by a man from SOM. And SOM are the architects, very famous American architects. They do a lot of high-rise, big projects around the world. And the presentation was around some work that they were doing using software that they'd developed inside SOM. And it was for high-rise buildings, and what he showed was the way that they could design multiple floors, and they could dedicate some floors for mechanical equipment and automatically adjust how many floors would be required for that. They could automatically locate columns, stairs, in order to optimise for gross floor areas. And all of this was done on, you can imagine this being done on these huge machines. But at the end of it, and the project that he was talking about was actually the John Hancock Centre in Chicago. So this was all done on software developed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. In the end, the result from doing all this computation to design this building, and it was, of course, embedding the knowledge that this firm had, and this is a firm that's always had engineers and architects together in it, produced cards of data, which would then be handed over to people, and I've just taken an SOM publicity shot, people like this who would hand draw it because they hadn't actually developed any of the graphics yet or desktop computers for people to go and draw these sorts of things. So that was the thing that they couldn't do. And at the end of his presentation, he said, the next thing we have to do is get the drawings to come out. So it's amazing to think, over 50 years ago, all the design work was being optimised, and it was something that was their IP and that they'd developed, but they couldn't do drawings. So now, part of my personal history, 20 years ago, I was working on this project, and I was the last person to stand back when they were looking for somebody to do this in 3D. And so I got given the task. And it was, can you translate what we can do in these physical models and put them into three-dimensional models? Now, before, with the SOM project in 1968, that was 7 years before Microsoft was founded, and 14 years before Autodesk was founded. When we did this project, Federation Square, Bentley had just bought a firm in Belgium called Triforma. Sorry, they bought a firm called Bricks, and Bricks had developed this software product called Triforma that they were going to try and integrate into Bentley. And this was a project that we did on MicroStation. And they were sending people out from Europe to try and say, well, yes, we bought this thing, we'll try and make it work for you. And so there was a lot of invention and innovation going on. But it was also before Revit was actually, it might have been when Revit was being developed by the Parametric Technology Corporation, or the people that left PTC to develop Revit. But it was before Autodesk had bought Revit. So it was also a time before we'd heard the acronym BIM. So when we were doing this project, no one was talking about BIM. But what we were talking about were things like Warwick spoke about before. We were talking about, well, what naming conventions are we going to use when we've got all this stuff in 3D, and then we have to get these things out of it, drawings out of it. And it was incredible to actually think that 8 people in the huge office put the whole three-dimensional model together and started to slice and dice it, and found that we had drawings coming out of it. We were so excited the first time we got a drawing set to come out, and we were under such pressure to deliver this thing that the first drawings set came out, and incredible, because the building moves around all over the place, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to slice and dice it in the same way. So we put it out, we celebrated, and the project architect for that particular package of works that we put it out spent the evening liquid papering his name off the drawings, because he didn't want to be associated with drawings that came from models. Very interesting, only 20 years ago. So 2 weeks ago, we won an award at Oricon, an innovation award. And this is the mechanical systems in the Westgate Tunnel. And we won an award for the computational design work that we did on this particular project. Now, the interesting thing about this is that none of this is hand-drawn. The last thing I want is people to be hand modelling all this sort of work. So this is all computationally derived. And we've done a whole lot of work on Westgate Tunnel to computationally derive cladding, to optimise cladding, to look at some of the support structures. And so this is just part of what we've been doing. Now, I've spoken before about, just before, about a project that had this incredible software that was being developed in-house, but they couldn't produce the drawings. I've spoken about Federation Square, where we actually could produce the drawings, but it was an incredible change process because people were so embarrassed about working, and they just refused to work with models that they liquid paper their names off drawings. They didn't want to be associated with it. In this circumstance, we've got incredible designers doing amazing things, but our contract with the state government and Transurban specifically states the deliverable is a 2D PDF. So if we're looking at overall supply chains, when at the very end of the supply chain, in terms of the consultants are concerned, what we're being asked to do is hand over effectively a paper drawing. It's incredible, really, that innovation like this occurs. And so the greater challenge, of course, is to understand what the industry can do and also think about how we can change what we're doing. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it actually is changing. And this is a couple of years old, of course. These contracts came out. And I do expect to start to see more projects where the deliverable is a digital model, digital data, digital files, and I embrace that. I'm trained as an architect. I love drawings. I love reading drawings, but they are holding us back. They're something that we need to get rid of. So here's some of the, in this sort of broader context, what we see is that there are effectively regulatory authorities who are now saying that you have to deliver digital models. And the latest one is, well, not the latest one, but one of the most significant ones for us, because we have a large operation in Hong Kong, is the Hong Kong Construction Industry Council, and we're helping write their guidelines for them. But one of the interesting things that they're doing is that they're looking at the entire supply chain. They're looking at the skills that need to be developed in Hong Kong. And they are looking at these sites, these building sites. They are expecting factories to be at the base of these building sites for assembly as things come in from wherever in China, that they'll be shipped in and then just really assembled and put in on site. They do want to see some fabrication occurring on sites, but they want it to be almost in like a temporary factory situation on sites. They have a real ambition there. And of course, from the beginning of last year, they mandated that all new government work has to be done in model form. We see that in Singapore. We see that with the Victorian Digital Asset Strategy now, and I know Colette Burke is speaking tomorrow. So we're expecting to see quite a big change in the way that things are being demanded to be delivered. We heard a little bit more about standards and so forth. We also announced last week that we were certified for ISO 19650, which is, of course, the ISO certification for BS 1192. And I held off on BS 1192 because I said, I don't know why we're certifying ourselves for a British standard. Let's wait till it becomes an ISO standard. And the team was jumping at the gun, particularly Will Hackney in my team, who... And we were looking at where this was developing, what our people were doing around the world, and we felt it was right and it was timely to go and assess a number of the works that we were doing. And we built a network of people together to look at how we were dealing with digital information, and we put it up for certification. And that's been a process which has been going on for a while, but we announced it and we were awarded the Kite Mark last week. Now, interesting that the Victorian Digital Asset Strategy actually references BS 1192. We have a number of clients who are already asking for that, ISO 19650. And I expect to see more projects will be referencing this in the future. So this is basically how you organise your digital information, and it's a big shift. The other thing is that we all know that we're pretty efficient, fragmented, laggard industry. We don't tell too many people about that, but the venture capitalists have worked out that we are as well. And they can see that if they come in and create some opportunities, there's some money to be made. And of course, PlanGrid, who is a sponsor here, were bought up last year, or at the beginning of this year, for $875 million. Now, I know how much the investors put in. I think it was about $50 million into that. So the lady that started up PlanGrid did quite well if you take $50 million off the $875 million that Autodesk were prepared to pay for it. This is happening all over the place. And so once you can see that there are external parties who can see that there's plenty of money to be made, then we all better watch out for startups that are going to come in and start taking chunks of work that we thought was part of what we were being paid to do, because they can do it much more efficiently and make a lot more money out of it. So internally, as the person that's leading change within the organisation, I've got to have a way of thinking about how do we understand all of this. And we work to the McKinsey 3 horizons in our organisation. So McKinsey, and there's a number of these sorts of models, but the Horizon 1 is where you're working at the moment. Horizon 2 is what's going on. Hang on, I've got a slide for that. In the next, whatever period that you work to. For me, this is what we're doing right now, and then we've got now to 3 years, and then 3 years plus. And that's really important for me to sort of start to put lines in between those for where things are coming through. And when I first got to Oricon, and I put a bunch of stuff in here, and I said, and that's in there, and then there's more stuff out there in Horizon 3. And the biggest surprise for me was just how fast clients were asking for things that I thought were going to be 3 or 4 years away, and they just came straight in. And I sat there and I thought, this is a bit of a problem, because my boss keeps saying to me, well, what's out there in the future? And I just used up my future very, very quickly. So I've now employed a futurist on my team, and her job is to keep looking in Horizon 3 and seeing what possibilities there are. Then there's also the other thing to think about, and it's the maturity of a market as well. So we've just heard before about standardisation. And once something is a commodity, you can bet that the practices within that are standardised all the way through. And Warwick said the thing that he really hates is that when you're on site and it's some sort of bespoke thing that somebody's just dreamed up, and you have to kind of go in there and sort of figure out how it's going to be put together. So we know that there's we put these two things together. And this is what we've called our Horizon Evolution Map. And we put it together because we were being asked by a bunch of our clients to come in and help them think about 3 horizons. But thinking about 3 horizons without understanding where something is in terms of if it's just something that you're thinking about, is it something that you're probably got a team that can sort of put that thing together? Is it something that somebody's already sort of put some shrink wrap around it? Or is it something that everybody in the industry is doing? Is very helpful. The other way to think about this is, and this is not coming through colour-wise so well, this is a red ocean, and this is the blue ocean. And if you've heard about red ocean and blue ocean, I'll just give you a quick summary of it. Red ocean is where everybody else is out there in the market doing the same sort of thing as you. So what are you competing on? You're competing because you've got something different. You're delivering it a different way. You've got a slightly different product potentially. Or you're competing on price. And more than likely, you're competing on price. And where there are standards and where there are tools that we all use, and this is the connection with the SOM. SOM were out there developing tools because Microsoft didn't exist, AutoCAD, Autodesk didn't exist. And so they were off in Horizon 3, Horizon 2, bring in their own software engineers to develop their own tools in a custom-built way, sitting out there in the blue ocean. Who could go out and compete with SOM in the 1960s? Who had the resources of a large multinational firm at that time to do that sort of optimisation work? However, everything tends to go like that. And of course, who now would any of us say, oh, we're going to build our own software system to develop models and drawings? No, we wouldn't do that. So of course, as all the technologies all go towards here, we all use desktops that are powered by Microsoft. We all use software that's sold by the major vendors. And so the challenge, as I said before, is to think about if you choose to go into a blue ocean and compete because you've got something different, and then you can actually charge your own price as well, if people want it, of course, is to think about how to get into this blue ocean. You may choose not to. You may say, our business is all about being as fast and efficient as possible and providing a great service, and we're going to be the absolute best here. And we are going to, and you have to actually do both in a way as well. You can, it's very difficult to think of companies that only sit out here. Some tech companies do that. And startups, of course, startups love to be out in this space because as soon as they drop down into Horizon 1, which means they get wide adoption, even if it's not completely bolted together, and in their terms it's bootstrapped, the idea is that somebody will come along and go and pay them a whole lot of money, like PlanGrid, and then and Autodesk will bring PlanGrid in and make sure that it's bolted into their suite of products, and of course goes in like that. So this is some of the ways that we use it, and we put a topography to it. This out here is a topography for us. And this is for me, I've said to my team, let's go and look and think about where some of the technologies are at the moment. And this is all database driven, so that we put it in and we just generate these things on the fly. We generate them for different clients, we generate them for different industries, we generate them for different services that we might be thinking about offering. This is just a general industry overview of where we think things are. And you can see here that we still think BIM's not completely standardised across the place. 5G internet's dropping in, of course, at the moment. I'll talk about machine learning a little bit. Here we go, machine learning. And because everything has a vector to it, of course, as well. And so machine learning has dropped recently from being Horizon 3 into Horizon 2. So the tools are readily available. And you're using it with your phones every day as it is. You may not be using it when you go to work yet, but you soon will be. And we connect up a bunch of things here that are interesting for us as well. So when we look at our machine learning lab, which we set up a couple of years ago, was monitoring a couple of these things. And this particular slide here is when we're looking at what the pace of IoT adoption as well. So to give you an idea of how we put some of these things into practice, this is and we have put machine learning into, we've done about 25 different projects with machine learning. And we have done some work, we've done some work on asset optimization. So we've done some work with data centers around optimizing cooling. And there's some stuff on our website. We had a 15% cost reduction, which is significant for a client when you apply machine learning onto their systems. This here I thought would be an interesting example for you. This is something that we get often asked. It's an asset audit. And this is an aerial shot of Cape Town, and the city there put out a specification for how they'd like this to be done. They wanted to know a whole bunch of different things. One of those things was just how much asphalt do we have? And the methodology that they suggested that was used was that you get out one of those wheelie measuring things, and you go along each road and you get the length, and then you go across here, you go across the middle, and you go across at the end, and you get the average, and then you do a little rectangle, and you add them all up, and you come and tell us how much asphalt we have. Now, the City of Cape Town, where health and safety is very important in our firm, and you probably don't want to send a whole lot of people out running around the City of Cape Town with wheelie measuring sticks. So this is a convolution neural network working. And we got a bunch of people working on this. And as I said, I've got a machine learning lab, so I've got a whole bunch of PhDs who sit in Docklands. And we throw some crazy things at them, and they do stuff like this. And part of what we're doing is training an algorithm to recognise from aerial images what is a road and what is not a road, and then to add it all up. So 97% accuracy, and this is the sort of output that you get from an image like that. So a methodology that a client is asking you for, which is to go out and do it the same old way that it's been done for a very long time, compared with if you take an image from a satellite, which can be updated at any time, you can train up an algorithm. And of course, don't forget, it's people writing those algorithms, and they're skills that need to be developed, and they will be jobs that we need to employ people for. And then, of course, you might only do that once every few years if you're the City of Cape Town. But if you can do it in this sort of way, where you can just keep updating information, you just might want to find out more about your assets, and you might do it on a more regular basis. And you might be doing that if you're any sort of asset operator or owner for any type of facility. So that's something that you should all be thinking about in terms of what could you be doing with what you're creating at the moment, and where will people be using the data that you're creating within the supply chain? How much further will that supply chain start to go downstream in the future? So as I said, we take those things, we look at what's happening in the market, and then we go out every few years. We go out and we do deep dives with our clients. And I thought I'd just share some insights because we've just released our latest, we call them our digital futures. So we've gone, this time we spoke to futurists all around the world. We engaged with a whole bunch of our clients through survey, and then we did some detailed interviews with a number of our clients as well. And here are some here are some of the highlights. This could be a whole presentation on its own, but this is the sort of thing that we posited, was that digital is going to transform the physical. It is going to create new opportunities, and for many of us that will be new revenue. But what you don't want to be is that you don't want to be the ones that completely missed it. Because there will be people looking to create new revenue and new opportunities who aren't in this room, who don't even know about anything that you do, and who will see that opportunity and they will run as hard as they possibly can at it. So, a lack of clarity, I think, is the first thing that really came out. The decision makers in the firm don't have an understanding of what it is when you're talking about, we're going to do digital this, we're going to do BIM that, we need to engage our supply chain to transfer this here, from here to here. There's always this pressure. Well, if we're going to do it, you're going to show us the ROI tomorrow. And of course, if you're trying to press up into a different horizon, if you're saying, well, we're just competing with everybody else on price, but we want to do something different, are you going to be able to be given the headroom to go out and do that? And the other one is cost. Now, I was at an interesting lunch the other day, and they were talking about ISO 19650 and how some things are going to be demanded to be delivered to that ISO, and how you may have to be certified for that. And somebody put their hand up from the audience and said, well, who's going to pay us to do that? Now, no one's going to pay you. And it was the same thing, Federation Square. Well, we were the ones making a 3D model together, but nobody wanted to get involved with it, none of the supply chain. It was all too expensive to train people, too expensive to do work in that way. No one's going to pay you any extra to do some of this, so you're going to have to make some investment yourselves. The focus is also very narrow at the moment. So, in transforming how we work, people are thinking about transforming the way that we work today and doing it a bit faster into the future. The new technologies they're looking at are talking about what are the new technologies that are already in the market. The one thing they're really not talking about at all is what sort of business are we going to create? Are we in the same business? Are we still selling time? Or are we talking about something else completely? And of course, as Warwick mentioned, this is becoming really, really important. And then finally, organisations don't feel like they're ready to thrive, and the ownership of the digital initiatives are not often always held by the business. So Lend-Lease made an interesting appointment at the beginning of the year. They hired a guy called Bill Ruhr, and he is the Chief Executive of Digital at Lend-Lease. Now, that's not digital delivery. That's not digital assets. That is whatever it needs to be at Lend-Lease to create a digital business and a digital future for Lend-Lease. So when I came in, I am the Chief Digital Officer. I know nothing about IT, and we have a CIO. A lot of organisations actually said, oh, it's the CIO who's in charge of digital. Now, that is entirely the wrong person to be in charge of digital. If you do not have a mature IT system, you probably don't have much longer in business. But if you, any IT leader at the moment, is one of the best skills that they have is dealing with vendors. because as I showed before, Microsoft's been around for a very long time, so they have to deal with the vendors to get the best type of system for our systems to run on top of. So very much what IT is about now is about project delivery in terms of one system goes out, another system needs to be replaced. And how do we manage all the various vendors that we're dealing with? How do we get the best value for our dollar out of it? That's what they're doing. They are not thinking about where is the business going to be in the next few years? What are the skills that we're going to need to run that business? What sort of value do we need to be creating? They're making sure that we've got an efficient operation for today. So having a business leader, C-suite, at the executive level is an opportunity for many businesses to create. So this is the last slide, and the last slide is really there to think for you to sort of think about that. Is are you going to be the most efficient operation possible? Are you going to really survive in a red ocean with lots of competitors that look the same as you? And that's an entirely legitimate business decision. Or are you going to go and poke out and think about an opportunity to create for yourself? And if you do so, how are you going to do it so that you're not trying to do both things at once? Because doing both things at once doesn't always work. You do have to juggle both things, but you can't have the same people doing both things. That's something that just never works, because most people spend most of their time making sure that the business is running efficiently. These are really interesting and challenging times for us all, but the opportunity is there. It's a very exciting time in our industries, and when I hire these PhDs to come in, I've got an intern program going, and they come in and I don't know where they get time within a PhD to come and spend time working on it, but there is a program that we've got going, and we have them sitting down there on these various challenges. You can see glimpses of the future of where the new skills are going to be, what opportunities are going to be created in the future, and I'm not pessimistic about massive job losses to technology. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for lots of people doing things that we're not even sure about and we can't even quite see at the moment. We're just getting glimpses of. So I'm very positive about that. I just would appeal to you all to think about how you're going to transform your own organisations. How are they going to be transformed? And ask the question, who is going to be in charge of that within your own businesses? Thank you very much.